Welcome back to the Wrong Advice Podcast. I'm your host, John Picciuto, and I'm very excited to have a long-lost friend, Miss Stephanie Janis, on with us today. Steph, how you doing?
Hey, John. I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm a little hungover, but life is very good. Can you give a quick introduction to the listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a spiritual life coach, and I help to really tap into their authentic power, to cultivate self-love, and to really step into their passion and purpose and ignite the spark that they may have been missing in their life. So that's the life work that I have embarked on over the last year, and it's been an incredible journey. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited about life.
Can't ask for much more than that. We've known each other for, I don't know, 10 years, maybe 8 years, like a long time. We worked together for like 5 hot minutes at this company in the city. And yeah, so I've been seeing your stuff all over Instagram, not Instagram, on Facebook. And I was just like, wow, this is really cool. This is another person that I know that's doing something completely different with their life than from what they started. So give me a little bit of insight into like what happened over the last year and like how you kind of ended up going down this path.
Yeah, so it's been a long journey. I'll say that. So I guess kind of back when you and I met, when I was working in sales, and I graduated college with the intention of, okay, I'm going to get a job that's going to land me the most amount of money, and just I don't care what it does. I don't care if I don't like it. I just want to make money, and that's it. So I started there. And, I started realizing what would happen was I would achieve these milestones of like what I attributed to be financial success. And I still wasn't happy, right?
Mm.
Like something missing. There was this void. Rocky, shh. Sorry. He
Well,
literally sits on the bed and like barks at himself for no reason.
we'll keep that in.
Oh, yeah. Um, so, I started achieving what I thought was success, right? And I was still unhappy. Like there was still something missing inside. And, I was always a big partier too. Like I would party and, go out and, kind of, I'd be like working these jobs that I really wasn't happy or fulfilled in. And then on the weekends and at night, whenever I could, I was just out, drinking and partying and kind of trying to forget how miserable I was.
Mm.
So finally, my journey really started like 7 years ago. I gave up drinking and partying altogether. I've been sober completely for 7 years.
Holy shit, congrats. That's awesome.
Yeah. So on that journey, I started kind of coming into this awareness that, there was more to life that meets the eye. Like there was something going on spiritually, right? And I started realizing that was the missing component in my life, is that I was always seeking, and I was actually seeking some sort of a spiritual connection. So I kind of started off on that journey. And, it took me different places career-wise. I thought maybe I would become some sort of a nutritionist or a naturopathic doctor. That was one of my ambitions for a while. And, I started kind of, I guess what was happening around the same time was I was like falling ill with chronic symptoms. So I was having a lot of like digestive issues, brain fog, really bad fatigue, like weight gain, acne, like just all of these things started happening in my late 20s. And I was like, I'm really not that old. Like, I don't know why this is happening, because like at first I was like, well, maybe this is just like getting older. And I was like, no, that can't be right. Like, I'm not really that old. Like, I take pretty good care of myself. Like, there's no reason why I should be like kind of falling apart. And I started going to doctors and they were all kind of like, oh, you're fine. Like, there's nothing wrong. My lab tests are all coming back normal. And I was like, something is wrong. Like, this isn't normal. So I kind of continued on like that for a couple of years. I wasn't getting any answers. I wasn't getting any sort of solution. They were kind of just, even like functional doctors and naturopathic doctors weren't giving me answers either. They were just, giving me some supplements, and I would take the supplements and I wouldn't feel better. And so, I knew that there was something missing in that component. Like there were answers that they didn't have for like chronic illness and conditions. So
Hmm.
started on this path on my own of like healing. And so I completely like shifted my diet. I started doing a lot of like detoxification of my own, like my body, and I started actually healing my body through food. And I was like, wow, this is amazing, because actually one doctor I went to, I'll never forget, like he had nurses on staff, and one of the nurses said to me, she was like, oh yeah, well, diet doesn't really matter, like when you're trying to,
Yeah.
and I was like, okay, like,
Yeah, sure.
and I would watch them like leave for lunch and they'd go get like Arby's, and like no judgment, but I'm like,
No, no, you could judge people who eat at Arby's.
I mean, like I was like, but it doesn't make sense. Like we should be able to heal our bodies, but like the medical system like doesn't even take that into account. Like they don't think that food and like health is like related. And so I started to be like, all right, that's weird.
Yeah, red flag.
I got a diagnosis of Lyme disease though, so
Oh
they did
shit.
this. So I was finally like, okay, I have somewhat of an answer of what's going on, even though they weren't really like getting to the bottom of the root cause or, anything like that. So anyway, I went on this healing journey. And what I started to realize was about 8 months into doing like serious detoxing protocols where I was like only eating fruit and vegetables, very, very clean, no coffee, no alcohol, no, started healing my body, but I kind of hit this wall where I wasn't really like progressing in my healing anymore. And what I started to realize was it was my mindset. It was my, like, there was like emotional healing that had to happen where there was like some trauma. There was some like just old trapped emotions in my body just from things that happen. Like as we go through life, right? Like things happen and hardships happen, loss happens, grief happens, we lose like relationships, all of that stuff. Like people, like we get mistreated, right? So that stuff weighs energetically on the body. And so I started realizing like there was a lot of unhealed baggage that I had to start looking at too.
Hmm.
That aspect of it. And yeah, really the mindset and the emotional piece. And, of course, to be completely candid, I was like hating myself. I was just talking to myself so poorly, like just the negative self talk, just overly critical and judgmental of myself. The body can't heal like that when you're constantly talking to yourself in this negative way, right? Because our cells are constantly listening to everything that we say, and the mind is so, so powerful. And so, like, for me, it was really important to get that piece correct, right? So that I could actually start to heal my body. So from that journey, I started realizing there were so many gaps in like, the medical industry. There was chronic illness was on the rise. People weren't really getting the answers that they needed. So it was like divinely inspired. I got the intuitive thought to start like a coaching business around helping people heal holistically. And it started off, I was coaching people with chronic illness, and what ended up happening was I started realizing that, people would come to me and they'd be like, well, like I want to just like eat better or, whatever the case is, but it wasn't about just eating better. It was about like building up self-worth in a way that like people loved themselves enough to make self-honoring choices. It was about, freeing themselves from the conditioning of the past, of all of these limiting beliefs that they had formed about themselves, about why, they couldn't take care of themselves or why they needed to treat themselves a certain way, right? It really came down to like self-love and like healing that relationship with themselves. And it wasn't about the food.
Hmm.
Like I sit there and tell people, yes, this is what you should eat. This is what you should eat. But if they're not like loving themselves enough to actually take those steps and stepping out of fear, because there's this fear-based mentality of like, I don't have enough time. It's too expensive, right?
Hmm.
Like there's fears that come up, and it's all because a lot of the times we live in fear. Like it's just constantly the decisions that we make, unless you're examining your mind and kind of like reprogramming and reconditioning yourself, like we've been conditioned to run on fear. So
Wow.
all of the decisions are made based on fear. And so it really, like what I realized was, from that point, I need to coach people on finding self-love, stepping out of fear, living from a place of faith, reprogramming their mind and their subconscious mind so that they can actually believe in themselves and love themselves enough to heal and then go after the life that they really want to live. Because we've been largely conditioned also as a society to think like, okay, life has to be a certain way, right? Like this is what it should look like. But the truth is, like, it can look any way we want it to. Like we can literally, like it's as much as you can conceive in your mind, like you can achieve.
Love
But
that.
most of us have been conditioned to play so small, and then we stay in that place of our comfort zone because we don't want to feel uncomfortable. And when we step outside of the comfort zone, it's the unknown, and that's really, really scary, right? And really, really uncomfortable. So we retreat back. So my practice now is about helping people find that self-love, helping people to cultivate the belief in themselves, to go after what it is that they want in life. And I really focus on helping women with all of this. But that's kind of the story of how it came to be. And it's kind of shifted and evolved. And it's from my own experience, which is why it's so like near and dear to me. It's because everything that I've learned, I like apply and use myself, right? And then I've realized like, wow, this really has worked for me and helped change my life. So then I pass it on to other women that I work with.
Dude, that's fucking amazing. I mean, you say so many relatable things that I've experienced in like the last 2 years. Namely, like, I harp on a couple sort of reoccurring themes on the podcast. The one is that like I was very similarly chasing money for the entirety of my 20s, like just trying to get the bag and fill a hole that I had inside of me that I didn't know it was there, that I was trying to fill up with money and stuff and things and shit that didn't matter. But like I had never, excuse me, I had never stopped to think if these were things that I didn't want. I was sort of almost conditioned to believe that they were the things that I want. And another thing that I harp on a lot is whether 25-year-old John could have learned the lessons that 35-year-old John has learned and gotten to the place that I'm at now currently sooner. And I've sort of come to the realization that the answer is no. Right? It takes trauma, it takes lessons, it takes like all of these like hardships in life to gain like the necessary mindset and understanding of like what's important, right? And at the end of the day, like while money is important, it is not the end all be all thing, right? Happiness, positive mental outlook on life, like health and all of the things that go into like a normal life is what's important. And I spent so much time putting a Band-Aid on trauma that wasn't being fixed. So I fucking love that. Literally everything you just said, because I couldn't possibly agree with it more. When you have these sort of clients that you deal with who have varying degrees of trauma and varying degrees of like issues that they need to work through, does that ever weigh on you? Like after a session, is it ever something where it's like tough to shake off? Like when they're like trying to go to you for help, is that something that like sticks with you at all?
Well, I tend to utilize energy clearing practices after client sessions so that I am not kind of carrying that energy with me, because I am sensitive to other people's energy, like their emotions and how they're feeling, and it can be heavy. But I think as coaches and people who work one-on-one in kind of an intimate setting, it's important to be doing those energy clearing techniques, whether or not it. I know he's crazy. Using sage to clear the room, or just kind of like sometimes I'll just shake, like I'll shake it out after, just kind of anything to get my body moving. And other times too, like I imagine almost like a bubble of light, like protecting me and keeping my energy and the client's energy separate, which is important as, people who do healing work. It's necessary to take protective measures.
Yeah, no, for sure. So your journey started to some degree 7 years ago, and then in the last year, you kind of really, took it on yourself to like start this new business and like create this new life for yourself. What would you say is like one of the top 1 or 2 lessons that you've learned about yourself over the last 2 year?
Wow, that's a good question. I mean, there's been so many lessons. Oh my gosh. Let's see, the top 1 or 2 lessons. Well, I would say the biggest one that I've learned is, like in the last 2 years, I realized like I was focused so much on like the worst possible outcome. Like whenever I would do something, I'd be like, oh, well, it's going to fail, or, like, what if this happens? Like, what if all of these bad things happen? Right. And then when I had that mindset shift of like, well, what if it goes right? And like started to kind of focus on that and focus on all of the ways that my dreams and aspirations and hopes could go right. Right. And focusing on like keeping that faith and trust that everything is going to work out. Like, as long as I believe in myself, that was the biggest lesson. Like, because basically whatever we believe to be true is true. Like, we're that powerful.
Yeah. Manifestation. Yeah.
So if I believe that I'm not worthy enough, that I'm not good enough, that, all of these things are wrong with me, then I'm not going to be able to call in what I truly want, right? Because I'm not like in energetic alignment with that, with my like limiting beliefs. So I think the biggest lesson for me was becoming aware of these limiting beliefs and working daily to shift them and to stay out of that place of like not allowing those thoughts to control me anymore is a continuing ongoing lesson. Like, the work is never really done and more is always revealed. But, there are processes to work through those beliefs as they come up so that we don't, become derailed by them. Because if we allow that script to play in our heads, it can prevent us from our true purpose, our passion, our calling. It can really prevent us from stepping out and going after the life that we really want to live.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, wow. Yeah. So it's funny because like I used to look at all of that manifestation, positive mind bullshit and be like, oh, this is just, hippie jargon mumbo jumbo. But then like when I look at like my journey, 2 years, I lost my job in the middle of the pandemic, full of depression, full of anxiety, no idea who I was. Like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with my life? Like, the world is literally falling apart at my feet. And like, I have like my true only sense of self was the thing that I did for a living, right? The thing that made my income, the thing that, I outwardly projected to the world as the most important identifier of myself. And when that gets taken away, it's like the ground is shifting underneath your feet. And I felt lost. But it was like through understanding the things that were important and learning about myself, of the things that I wanted to do with my life, I was able to sort of come to this great realization that I wanted to chase my dreams of being a photographer. And like, I would never have given myself that breath or that opportunity to look at my life and be like, I'm not happy, right? If there was no pandemic, if I didn't lose my job, I'd still be sitting in a cubicle, punching away on a time clock, unrealizing any of the dreams that I had in my life, because I would never have had the opportunity to ask myself that question. And you said something that was super important earlier. It's like, people don't give themselves the space to sort of make these life decisions. We think it's automatically too hard to go get another degree or start a side business or create something for ourselves, right? But when you actually start manifesting that shit and believing that you can do it, these things happen. I mean, I'm literally living like my greatest dream right now of getting to like carry a camera with me and make money and earn a living and be so wildly fulfilled. But like 2-year-old John, not 2-year-old, but 2 years ago, John would have been like, dude, what the fuck are you talking about? You want to carry a camera around and be a photographer? That's crazy. But it's like, it's just a true testament to that we have the ability within us to create the life for us that we want.
Yeah, I love that. That is so powerful. And it's so true. It's, everything is happening for us. That was another really powerful lesson that I learned, because in the past, I would always I would see these, perceived misfortune, mishaps, right? Like losing a job, or, just a relationship ended, or something didn't work out the way that I wanted to, whatever that was. I would think about it as, why is this happening to me? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Once I had that mental shift out of why is this happening to me, and out of this like victim mentality, into how is this happening for me? Because everything is always happening for us, right? Even as you demonstrated with the loss of your job, right? It allowed you to examine yourself in a way that you would have never examined yourself, and now you're living the life that you've always dreamed of, and you would have never, even considered that had you not had the time. Right. So it's like, in the moment, it could have been perceived as this like misfortune, but it was one of the greatest blessings of your life, probably, to lose that job now looking back. Right.
Completely. It was, it afforded me a breath, right? Like, it afforded me while all the calamity that was going on in the world and in my personal life and in work, that I didn't ever have an opportunity to stop and self-actualize and like diagnose myself of like what was going on internally. And, through therapy and a lot of amazing work that I've done there, I've been able to just become the best version of myself that like I'm more comfortable in my skin today than I ever was in my entire life. And that's coming from a person who's very confident, very outgoing, very like easygoing in life, right? But I didn't realize that a lot of that outgoingness was at times like a facade, right? It wasn't actually real. Like I didn't actually believe the things that I was saying or doing, and it was just part of this persona that I had created in my head of like, who is John?
Yeah. It's just so powerful. I think the pandemic did that for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Kind of forced us to sit and examine ourselves and our lives and our relationships and what wasn't working. Same thing happened to me. I was in this job that I wasn't really, happy in. I actually got laid off too, right at the start of the pandemic. And I was in a relationship. I was engaged to somebody. I wasn't really happy with, and, lost that job. And same thing. I was able to kind of examine, like, I was like, oh shit, I am not happy.
Yeah.
Like, and I ended up leaving that relationship. Like, and, I thought, like, same thing with being chronically ill. I thought it was the worst thing that ever happened. Blah, blah, blah. Like, I was in victim mode over it for so long. And then one day I just woke up and I was like, this was the best thing that ever happened to me. Literally, like, put me on my soul's path, like, completely picked me up from over here and was like, nope, you're going here.
Mm-hmm.
Just like set me on this like healing journey where I've actually like come home to myself. Like I
love that.
Like, and it was like, I was just so like disconnected and lost like from my spirit almost. And today, like, I feel like I'm finally like, I found my soul's purpose. I'm like walking that path, and, it's scary and it's incredibly uncomfortable at times, but I would 100% choose that over like, like, it's like, you have to choose your hard, right? It's like yes, like creating your life, like your dream life is hard. It's scary. It's a lot of unknown, but like, is it scarier to like go and just like clock into a soul sucking job that you hate every day and never have like like any sort of like other plan for your life? Like, that is way scarier to me than stepping out the unknown and like,
I mean, I completely agree. And, it's I think the most unfortunate thing about sort of like how you get to this point in typically, I would imagine, in your mid 30s, I'm 36, but it's like, I never checked in with myself, right? Like, I went to college, I got a degree, I got a job, and I just got on the hamster wheel and never once asked myself, like, is this what I want to be doing, right? Like, is this making me happy? Like, it's certainly making me money, but like, am I fulfilled? Am I doing anything with purpose? Am I happy? And like, I never, ever, ever stopped to ask myself if I was happy. And it's funny, when my parents sold their house last year, I like found a whole bunch of old journals that I used to write in, and I was like, man, I was not happy. But you would never notice that by my Facebook, by my Instagram, by my Twitter. Like, none of these things were like actual real depictions of like the things that I was feeling. And it's so easy to go about like in a social perspective to pretend that everything's fine and everything's okay when deep down inside you're not. And I think when you start having stuff taken away from you, like you lose family members, a job, whatever it might be, that's really the only opportunity you get to check in with yourself and be like, am I doing what I want? Am I happy?
Absolutely. And that's why these experiences are all for us, right? Like the low times, once you can start to kind of learn to ride the wave of the lows and learn the lessons in those lows and realize that it's happening for you. It's an opportunity to step into your power, align with your highest self and your most authentic self at the soul level. Then these challenges, don't weigh so heavily, right? Because we know that they're lessons and they're helping us to up level and evolve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's kind of the perspective shift that changed my life was, understanding that and learning to kind of ride with that through the highs and the lows of life.
Oh, fuck yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's never in the good times that we learn anything really, it's like, I'm like, oh yeah, this is great. Like, it along. It's always those those low times where, we're forced to surrender. And, we just kind of take it from there. Like, it's all right, this is what's happening right now. Like, I just got to roll with it. I'm going to show up as best I can, learn how to navigate through it and love myself through it, and trust that better times are coming and this is happening for me in some way. And then, when we get to the other side of it, we can always see how it was working out for us. But
Yeah, I love that.
it's all about those lessons and integrating those lessons, right? So once we go through those lessons, actually like embodying and integrating the lessons into your life, and that's when you start to see the changes and the shifts.
Yeah. You mentioned when you were talking about healing yourself from like the chronic illness and like you had like the baggage to work about like through mentally, right? Like past traumas, like in relationships or whatever it might have been. I was always a huge proponent of like quote unquote living life without regret, and like I don't regret anything that happens. But when I started going to therapy, I realized that like these issues that I had when I was younger, like whether it was a failed relationship or whatever it might have been, I held on to those things even if I was outwardly saying like I don't live life with regret. My question for you is, how do you teach your clients to handle regret, and what do you think is a powerful practice for like sort of mitigating those nagging feelings of regret?
Mm. Well, the first thing I would say is, we hold a lot of regret and shame and guilt around like how we acted, right? A lot of the times, or how we didn't act or how we didn't show up. So the first thing I invite them to do is, let go of like those feelings of remorse against yourself, or like those feelings of self-hatred for not being the way that you thought that you should be. Because each day we get a new day and a chance to start fresh. So if you're not showing up the way that you want to show up, like, up until today, that's okay because we have today, right? And we can completely shift everything moving forward. So there's that, I think, in that perspective. And then for letting go of guilt and kind of those old energies that aren't serving my clients, I like to do breath work with them. That can be a really powerful tool to let go of trauma, anything energetically that's stored in the body. I've had a lot of really powerful experiences healing the inner child through doing breath work. And inner child healing as well, kind of going back within. I help my clients to access that aspect of themselves because we're very, multi-dimensional beings. So we have a lot of different aspects of ourselves within. And we all still have that like inner child that has been wounded, through, things that have happened to us in our lives. And it's not necessarily oftentimes like even these horrible things. Like it can just be like something happened, an experience in your life, right? Like, so I'll give you an example. So like I have an older sister who's like very, very ADHD. Like she was just required a lot of attention from my parents. So just very like energetic, outgoing. And I formulated this from that experience that like I had to be quiet and good in order to be like, it wasn't okay for me to like fully express myself because my parents already had their hands full. So like I wanted to help them out by like kind of,
Wow. Yeah.
and so when I realized that, but it's expressing itself later in life by me not wanting to like fully show up and share my voice and be seen out there, right? So these were some of the beliefs that I had to work through. And once you can kind of go back and identify where they come from, and why I'm kind of sharing about this is because like guilt and shame can be formulated from these experiences from childhood. So once you can go back and work with the inner child and kind of reparent the inner child, give the inner child what it needed at the time. So whether or not it was like acceptance, encouragement, love, kind of reparent yourself in that way and bring in self-compassion and self-love, and then start to reframe the belief, right? So it's not like an overnight one and done kind of thing, but bringing in those positive affirmations contrary to that old belief. And you start to literally like reprogram the subconscious. And that's why, like you mentioned, earlier when you were like, I felt like I was just like kind of on autopilot. Like I was just doing these things and like I didn't even know why. It's because the mind is so powerful. From the ages of like 6 to 12, the subconscious mind is a sponge and it's soaking up everything from our environment. So we're literally programmed by our parents' beliefs, by society's beliefs, by the beliefs that we form from observing our environment. And then we operate largely off of that. And if it's completely unexamined, then you're literally not even running off of your own beliefs. It's like your society. And
Yeah.
so like, it's so important to go back and like, look at that stuff. So, the guilt and the shame can be let go of if you go within, be willing to look within, right? Because a lot of us it's just, again, we've been told like, just, okay, it happened, like move on. Right. So that willingness and courage and strength to kind of go within and look at what's there and make the conscious choice that you're not going to hold on to that anymore and that you're going to release it. So through, these powerful practices like breath work, or I teach also my clients like different embodiment tools, helping them to get into their bodies because we're so like up in the logical mind all the time. And really like our emotional life lives in our body. So reconnecting with the body is a really powerful way to release emotions as well. So I teach things like movement, nonlinear movement to help kind of, release any of that stagnant energy that might not be serving them anymore.
That's awesome. I had I guess was it subconscious mind coach or an unconscious mind coach? I guess it's sort of the same thing on my podcast a couple months ago, and she deals specifically with that. It's just so wildly interesting to me because I never spent time trying to identify the reasons behind how I was feeling or why I was feeling away until I started going to therapy. And it just unlocks a whole opportunity for people to grow. And my biggest question, I guess, when it comes to this sort of like coaching practices, it's not like a one and done thing, right? So you have a session with a client and you breathe with them and you work with them. I would imagine it takes multiple sessions. So what is that sort of pattern like when you identify something that someone's dealing with and like that process of like sort of breaking them through, and like what does that breakthrough feel like for you?
Yeah, so it depends. Like, it's not definitely on a case by case basis. But typically, what I like to do with clients is work with them for a minimum of 1 month. But I would say the ideal amount of time to really create a transformation would be 3 months. Work together, on a weekly basis, once a week for 3 months, and I take them through the process of transformation that I've experienced myself. Right, so it kind of starts off with doing this physical and mental detox. So we start off by, like, I offer different mindset shifts around fear, around, learning lessons while we're here on this planet Earth, right? Kind of just shifting the mentality of like, okay, I'm just here like aimlessly wandering around, to Earth is a school and you're here to learn lessons for your soul's involvement. And
Ooh, I like
everything,
that.
yeah, like everything that is happening, like we talked about, is for your highest good. There's lessons that you need to learn while you're here. This is all part of your soul's curriculum. So, like, kind of, I like to empower my clients to shift out of like a victim mentality, like into more of like an empowered state. So I'll give them like tools that they can use throughout the day, kind of like alignment techniques and mindset shifts to, like, for another example that I'll use is, when they're doing something, whatever it is throughout the day, whether they're having a sip of water, whether they're, taking a walk outside, whether they're experiencing, well, it starts with the smaller actions of our day, right? I tell them to say to themselves, like, as they're doing this, I'm choosing this. I am choosing this, because then you start to see, like, you're choosing every action that you take. And it takes you out of this, like, oh, things are happening to me. It's like, no, I'm literally choosing this. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing this. And then once they kind of get that down, I'll take them a bit further and tie that to, okay, I'm choosing this thought. I'm choosing this emotion, right? Because it's very easy for us to give our power away to like these limiting beliefs, these thoughts, these emotions that are not serving us. So kind of creating that mindset shift and helping them to step out of victim and into conscious creator. It's something that I really had helped me so much. So that's really important. So that's kind of like the first phase of transformation. The second phase is we start to go within and we do this inner child healing. We do the breath work. We do divine feminine healing, kind of helping them to rebalance. Because a lot of the times, women in today's society, we're very much living in the masculine and the logical and, up in the thinking mind and, do. And, feminine energy is all about like being and like receiving and enjoying and just, flowing. And it's just not really like conducive to today's society. So
yeah,
helping them to kind of get back into that space. And then the third phase that we go through is self-love and, learning how to honor your mind, body, and soul, making soul honoring choices, living in alignment with your values. And, just learning how to care for yourself. Right. And so that's phase 3. And then phase 4, we go deep into manifestation, looking at your self-concept, because it's really, that's really what it comes down to, kind of like what we talked about before, is what you believe and feel about yourself is directly correlated with the life that you're going to call in. So if you're dealing with all of this trauma and, unhealed trauma and hurt and baggage from the past that you haven't dealt with, of course it's like horrible. But that's what's going to, like, if you don't deal and address with those issues, then you're not going to believe that you're worthy. You're not going to believe that you're good enough. And you're going to be calling in these relationships and, situations that are going to be reflecting that back to you. So it's important to do that healing work before you can actually start manifesting in a way that's going to be calling in, a soul aligned life. Right. So that's kind of my signature method, I guess, of transformation that I take my clients through. And it's 12 weeks.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, because I was very curious on like how a journey like that would start. Because I know it's taken me, about almost 2 years now to like be this version of myself. When I look at like sort of what I've been able to accomplish over the last almost 2 years in photography, it's fucking incredible, honestly. And I do so much cool shit. But I think when I've sort of embarked on this new career, I never had sort of a context for how I would measure success, right? So when you worked in sales, success was how much money you made. When I worked in sales, success was how much money I made. And there was very clear indicators on like what success looked like. And now it's a little bit different, right? Because I'm not focused on money. I need to make enough to live and pay my rent and like pragmatic shit. But the way in which I measure my success has changed dramatically. And to some degrees, I'm still sorting out what that success looks like. What does success look like for you, and how do you measure success today?
I love that. Well, I am a Capricorn, so I do, I am like goal oriented. So I have business goals, right? Like I am a business owner, so I have like revenue targets that I'd like to hit, but that's not my primary identifier of success anymore. So what success means to me now is, can I live a life of spiritual alignment? Can I live a life where, I'm flowing, like I'm trusting something greater than myself, the universe. I am living from a place of joy. I am living from a place of authenticity. I am able to take care of myself while still running a business, while still making time for activities that light my soul on fire and bring me joy. I would say that like kind of one liner around that is like to live a really balanced life full of passion, purpose, and meaning, and being of service to the collective consciousness is what success looks like for me now.
So nothing big at all, then.
I mean, I want what I do to benefit others in some way, and I want to be able to feel happy and fulfilled at the same time, and still while still focusing on my own self-development, right? And that's one of the things about being a coach is like the better I don't say the better, but like the more information that I learn that like helps me is going to help my clients more. So it's like the more I grow and like the more
Yeah.
like the better it's going to be for them. So it's like it's just really cool.
I gotta be honest, that level of like selflessness is like sort of an inspiration to me because I like people who are about building community and like, encouraging the betterment of other people because for 20 years of my life, I didn't give a fuck about anybody but myself. And that's changed a lot as I've gotten older through this podcast and just through the relationships that I have with my friends and family. I'm very, very much focused on I want everyone to be happy, right? Like, and happiness is an incredibly broad term, but like at the end of the day, if you can check in with yourself and be like, I'm super content and happy right now, I don't think there's anything else that's important in life. So to hear you say that is super inspiring to me for sure. What inspires you?
Ooh, I love that. It inspires me to do the work that I'm doing, honestly. I mean, it's my greatest inspiration right now is to help women go through these and navigate these really challenging situations that they go through. And, especially women that have like a purpose of healing. I'm called like women like that are kind of drawn to me because we go through a very difficult path. And that path is like we have to walk through a lot of uncomfortable and really challenging situations so that we can help other people through it. So I believe like my soul's mission, like my soul agreed to take on these like very powerful lessons. And I agreed all of this, right? And so basically so that I can help these other women. So I don't know if that makes sense or
It
not, but
does. Yeah.
yeah, like so the women that I'm calling in are kind of on that similar path where they're going through some heavy shit while they're on planet Earth, and it's all because they're like this beacon of light that like they're supposed to turn around and help others. Like yeah, it's crazy. But I feel like that's really what lights me on fire. I mean, what else lights me on fire is I love being outside in nature. That's like one of my like just happy places. I love my dog. But I would say like my biggest passion and purpose is the business that I'm creating, and just on that level of helping people to recognize their true light so that they can shine bright and heal and just be themselves and just be okay with being themselves, because like I think a lot of us like came up in the world believing that like who we are wasn't enough, and
Yeah.
that couldn't be further from the truth. We all have these unique gifts and abilities, and it's so much more than what we've been led to believe.
Yeah. I mean, I fucking love that. I think that's beautiful. We were talking about failure before, and like for the longest time in my life, I was like afraid to fail or what that perceived uh, experience would be like to everyone around me except for myself, right? So if I got fired from my job in the pandemic, like that's a unabashed failure, right? Like I failed at the thing that I was doing. And I used to be incredibly fearful of failure. But over the last couple of years, I've been able to find sort of, I don't want to say calm or comfortability in failure, but like in going for the things that I don't necessarily think I could achieve, but not being afraid to fail, right? Like I no longer have this ingrained worry that I'm not going to be successful. I believe I'm going to be. I know that I'm going to be because I have no choice to be.
Yeah.
What's your biggest fear?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I think we all have that like fear of failure ingrained in us. That is definitely a fear. But I would say, I think like being an entrepreneur, like it's just a different vibe, right? Like it's not like, oh, I know for sure I'm getting a paycheck every 2 weeks and it's the same amount and it's always coming in regardless if I work 1 hour or 5 hours or 10 hours. Like it's always going to be the same, right? Except obviously if you're in sales, but you still will have like that paycheck, right? So I think entrepreneurship has brought into the surface these fears of like, oh my gosh, am I going to be able to do it? Right. But it all comes down to, like you said, that belief and trust in yourself and in the universe. Right. So it's that constant working to shift out of like a scarcity type of a mindset and into like, this is like, I know that I'm going to be okay. I'm being taken care of. I am abundant, and pairing that mindset with the aligned action is kind of how like I've worked through that fear in the past. Like, so I'm going to keep that mindset, and it's not that I'm not going to do anything for my business, but I'm going to, have that mindset and then take the steps that I need to each day. And if I do that, like, I know and trust that I'm going to be okay. Right. And that's kind of like one of the larger fears that I've had to work through in becoming an entrepreneur, for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's just so funny because like the way that I contextually view my life has changed pretty significantly over time. And I'm not scared of success. I'm not like put off by it. I'm not, I don't live that way anymore. And it's so common for people to live that way. It's like a safe space to be afraid. Right. And I think when you break that mindset, it can be transformative for your career path, your life path, etc. When I look at my business from like a photography perspective, there are like obvious monetary goals, and then there are like achievement goals, right? Not like awards or anything, but like who I get to shoot, what I get to shoot for, magazine stuff, etc. So like I've got like dreams that are like in the process of being manifested and created for myself. I guess with just like life in general, or specifically with your business, what is like your biggest dream?
My biggest dream and my vision for myself is to basically have this empire, right? Where I'm coaching, I'm creating a lot of courses, like course content and materials, probably kind of stepping away from one-on-one coaching, perhaps doing some group coaching. But I also really envision myself as like an author, like a best-selling author.
Fuck yeah.
I envision myself living somewhere in the tropics, kind of living off of the land, growing my own fruits and vegetables. And I also envision putting on these really beautiful, like luxury retreats where people fly in from all over the world. I fly in all of these different healers, all of these different healing modalities, like, energy healing, sound bowls, just flying in all of these different healers, right? Shamans, and having this like chefs, raw vegan chefs, and having everyone kind of do like a cleanse while they're there, like on a juice and like raw food cleanse, and just creating this like really beautiful safe haven for like a week where people can just come and completely unplug, somewhere obviously like really beautiful and just remote, and where they can come and just get healing and have like a profound transformation. So that's kind of the three different pieces that I see myself, kind of when I'm looking at like the fullest expression of myself in the future. That's what I see.
That's fucking awesome. I mean, that's a very clear picture that you've painted for me. That's fucking cool. I mean, that's awesome. Yeah. I like to spend the last bit of every podcast doing sort of like a rapid Q&A. Some are super easy, some are a little bit more in depth, but I will start with, what is your favorite book?
One of the most transformational books for me has been Radical Acceptance, Embracing Your Life with the Heart of a Buddha by Tara Brach. She's amazing. It's all about learning to accept and love and bring awareness to your emotional nature instead of trying to push and avoid and reject. And through that process, transmuting the emotion and bringing yourself back into a place of presence, awareness, and open-heartedness. And it changed my life. It was just, I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Like,
oh, awesome. So, that's great.
Yeah.
What's your favorite food?
That's a good question. Right now I'm really on smoothies and salads because it's the summertime. So I love me a good smoothie. That's like one of my staple, food, everyday smoothies. So,
I like smoothies too. My NutriBullet is one of my favorite like gifts I've ever received.
Yeah, it's so good.
What's your favorite movie?
Oh, good question. I mean, I'm a stickler for romantic movies. So like the two that are coming to my mind right now, like Titanic is like a timeless like fun.
Nice.
I can't not say it. Serendipity is also one of my favorite
Ooh,
movies.
that's a good one. I would pick Serendipity over Titanic, but it's just because, like, how often do you have 3.5 hours to watch a boat sink? You know.
I That's but good one. I'm a
um.
Leo.
Yeah. Do you believe in an afterlife?
Yes, I do. 100%. I think that there is so much more going on that we can see or perceive, with our five senses. And, I definitely believe in there's something going on for sure. Like this is not the
I
end.
think one of the great reliefs that I've uncovered on this podcast is this is going to be somewhere in my mid 80s episodes, and I'm batting like 90% on people who believe there's something beyond this physical normal world, and that's like kind of nice. It's very like, okay, doesn't matter. We can like live a carefree, easier, like live life a little bit easier. There's something else out there when we're gone, and I think that's great.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the soul is, I believe, eternal. I think that, energy can't be created nor destroyed. It just changes form. And, I definitely believe that consciousness doesn't age. The physical body obviously ages and, we're not leaving with the physical body, but I think the soul is, able to travel and access different realms and dimensions. I mean, even when we're sleeping and stuff like that, it's like we go to these kind of alternate realities.
I love
I
that.
don't think sense.
I love that.
Yeah.
What gives you confidence?
Helping others.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's pretty great. What's the best piece of advice someone's ever given you?
Oh my gosh, so many different things. Recently, the one of the greatest piece of advices that I've gotten was that fear, it was kind of just more of like a mindset shift around fear. And she told me like fear is really just when you've reached the end of your known world. So you're like on the edge of expansion. And I was like, huh, like that's really cool to kind of look at it in that way instead of like, oh gosh, I wish this would go away. It's like, no, like lean into it and just see, like see what happens.
Yeah. No,
So that's
that's good.
pretty cool.
What it,
Yeah, that's kind of,
what is your best piece of advice for someone that's hearing you on this podcast for the first time?
I would say to trust yourself and trust the woman that you're becoming or the man that you're becoming, and to start to trust your intuition, like that inner knowing within you, because that is really where all of your answers lie. Like that little voice inside of you that, immediately will start to try to reason away with our thinking mind of why this couldn't happen or why you can't do this or why this shouldn't be. But if you can start to access that inner wisdom that lives in your body and trust that and start to follow that, like that's really when the magic started to happen for me. So, I mean, that would be one piece of advice that I'd leave with the audience.
That's awesome. My last question is, give me a recommendation for something that you've recently consumed. It could be a book, a movie, a podcast, TV show, just something that you've enjoyed lately that you think everyone should check out.
I'm currently reading Psycho-Cybernetics right now. I don't know if you've heard of that book.
I have, yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really powerful, like all about the subconscious mind and improving your self-concept, all these kind of basic manifestation tools and, just kind of coming into that awareness and your personal power and it also talked about, which I thought was really awesome and interesting was, he was like, our self-concept comes from like interacting with other people and realizing like we're all kind of, children of like this creator. And like, who are you to tell yourself that you're not good enough, right? When you were actually created like in the image of your creator. And, so like God doesn't make any mistakes. And, you know, it was just kind of like a really powerful lesson, because I think a lot of the times, like, we can start to kind of like beat ourselves up for our little imperfections and our, you know, our shortcomings. And it's helpful to remember that, like, nothing happens by mistake. Like, you are the way that you are for a very specific purpose and reason. And just because the world doesn't embrace, you know, uniqueness and creativity doesn't mean that, you know, you don't have a very specific plan, you know, and purpose that you're here to carry out. So, yeah, it's a really interesting book.
I love that. I also think it's important if someone's listening to this, and it's like a lot, at times it's very easy to say like that we all have a plan and a purpose for ourselves. It takes work to figure out what that purpose is, right? It's not something that you're going to uncover like one day, right? It's going to come to you over time, and like just have a willingness and an openness about your life to be able to let things come to you, and good things will happen.
Yep.
My recommendation's a bit of a cop-out. I just want someone who's listening to this episode today to go out and try something new, whether it's food or a workout, a fucking photography class, a paint class, just something cool and new that you haven't done before. Go out and do something. Life's short, and make the most of your time. Steph, man, this completely exceeded all the expectations that I had for this conversation. I'm just so wildly impressed with like the human being that you've become, and I just love this journey for you, and I am incredibly appreciative of the time that you gave me today to be on this podcast. I have an extremely cheesy line: if you've been on my podcast, you're part of my family. So thank you so much for your time today.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Thank you, John, for having me. So, like, just amazed to hear about all the things you've been doing since GDS, your business and this podcast. I mean, it sounds like you're doing big things over there, and I'm proud of you.
Oh, thank you so much, Steph. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Take care.